order the work session for October 15th. We're here to discuss the water rates to meet the USDA letter of condition and requirements. And due to not having everybody here, we're only allowed to speak about this topic. So I'll do my best to keep us on topic, and we'll turn it over to Melissa.
He's going to try to just record everyone. All right. So, as Jason mentioned, the purpose of tonight's meeting is to come to a consensus on a water rate structure that council would adopt by resolution at the November meeting, but it would not have to be adopted by ordinance until effective July 1st, 2024. So you wouldn't see that again until June 2024, probably on council meeting to adopt that by ordinance and become the effective rate. And the reason we have to do this is because our letter of conditions for the revenue bond that we got from the USDA says that we have to be able to sustain our debt service through our water rates. It's a revenue bond, which means you have to use the revenue for which the loan is taken up for.
So real quick, can we, if we want to, say we want to adopt a rate schedule where we slowly introduce this over the 4-year period instead of doing it, so we could adopt a resolution in the ordinance on a yearly basis until we get to the rate of 2024.
We need to have a resolution in order to close on the construction loan. We need to have a resolution that is committing to having a certain rate in place by FY25.
So how we get there doesn't matter.
Right.
We just have to have the resolution. Okay.
Yes. The USDA has gone through and come up with this EDU, which is equivalent dwelling unit, and that includes the commercial businesses or commercial customers, but then it divides it up through this kind of convoluted formula, and that's how they got to this amount. That's how they got to this amount of 35.45. I will say, as a little side note, I went back and looked. They used all of the expenses, the operating and maintenance, and they did not take into consideration that we already had a loan that was being paid out of the general fund. So that's the 301 sewer debt that we paid $53,000 a year for. They didn't take that into consideration because they consider that a general fund debt. So you'll see we have a much lower EDU than we should. So I do address that later so that we can have a completely self-sustaining water fund or enterprise fund. But again, we're only required to do that, but I do have a proposal where it is higher, and that's for future planning purposes. It's not to stop everyone, but I just want everyone to see what it looks like if we have a self-sustaining water system that also puts money away for the future. Like we're going to need a new well. We have to abandon one of our wells, and we're going to need a new well, which is going to cost us money. And instead of constantly having to finance everything, it would be great if we had some reserves that we could take from the capital costs.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I introduced that, and I'll warn you, it's a little bit of a shock, but it's for future planning. So I just want to keep that.
Some also quick questions for you right now. What's calculated EDU right now?
I calculated it at.
I mean, you got to pay.
No, that's okay. I calculated our EDU at 46.72.
Right now?
Is what it needs to be. Yeah.
What is out?
Oh, currently it's $27.
How much?
27.
27.
Mm-hmm. Our current EDU is 27. Even. Yes. So since we are there, I can give, if anyone interested on, well, I'm going to give this something. Also important to note is that our MHI, our median household income, that is a blended total between the residents that are outside of town and the residents that are inside of town and the residents that are also outside of our Bowling Green voting jurisdiction. They took all these MHIs and did blended based on how many people were in each jurisdiction. And we come up, the USDA comes up with, Anything else on this one here? Okay, so this is the USDA's limit HI. And they say it's 40,971. However, that is from 2010 census. So our current actual MHI is 61,000. So that's another factor that's kind of skewed.
50% jump since 2010?
Yes. The calculation is between 2005 2010. It's a calculation that the USDA used. They're going to be updating it this year. However, we got our loan based on the old MHI. So they used FactFinder, and FactFinder had, 2006 to 2010 American Community Survey 5-year estimates, how they came up with it. If you go to you will see on your MHI right here, there's 61,458, and this is with 2018 data. So these are some factors to keep in mind as we're going through this.
Well, that's all good, but when you raise that rate, then half the community is way below that. It's a burden on that half the community. And fixed income, lower household income, so we've got to keep that in mind also.
And I will address that as well. So if I use what the USDA has suggested and get to a very similar rate structure to what we have, but update the rate to get to the 3548 EDU, it looks something like this. Yeah, we have the out of town and the in town, as you guys used to be out of town, with commercial, residential, and then over here we have our out of town. You can see some example bills here. So, for instance, in town residential minimum water bill would be $61.05 based on this rate. $61.05 is less than what the out of town water customers currently pay. And those water customers include the residents living in Caroline Manor, who are some of the lower income residents in the area. So, to keep in mind. With this proposal,
So what's the out of town?
the out of town would be $98.45 every month.
Every other month?
Every other month. These are all, I'm keeping it in bi-monthly because that's what we're used to seeing. We would actually be splitting it up and billing it monthly because at that point we'd have the regular reviewers and it would be very simple and it would help alleviate some of that burden, especially on people on fixed income.
So your EDU is actually 1 month. 35
The EDU is considered for 1 month.
And this is all residential, not commercial.
Commercial is down here. I'm sorry, I'm doing a great job. This is all the commercial. So that's what I come up with. These, like I said, we have some sample rates. And to give a background on how we got to the sample rates, I took every single water bill and figured out exactly how much usage they did for the 12-month period, put them in categories, divided them, got some averages, and know how many people are in each category, and that's how we got to these amounts. So these are example amounts, but there are average usage. We would expect our average usage to go up slightly with new meters. So when we get the new meters in, people usage, we have some meters that just don't work effectively and efficiently, so those people might start noticing higher water bills.
So is everybody getting a new meter?
Every single person will get a new meter. Every single business, every single resident.
Because the meter basically is a password.
But
What about leakage in the town itself?
we did what I did to try to web engineering, gave us information on web engineering. They have factored it into their PER and into their project is I gave them all the well readings for the same time period that I gave all the meter readings. And actually, they were very surprised to find out that we came out to a very low, I think it was like 7% loss, which is not a huge amount. But what I explained to them is oftentimes when the meter is not working well, we go ahead and we bill them at a minimum bill. And for our purposes, we just put in $5,000. They could have used $2,000 and they're going to get billed the same amount, but for our purposes, we just pay $5,000. So in that way, it's not accurate because we're saying that we bill someone 5,000 more gallons, which doesn't affect our bottom line, dollar wise, but it does affect how they're calculating the water loss. So again, that's just kind of a piece of information that, are we using good data?
Plus that water loss takes into account any fire hydrant usage, such as like from fire rescue, not ones that we run a meter or something.
Right, and we had several water leaks, so it was an unusually low loss that we had.
Yeah, it's still good, usually it's 15%.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and we did know, we've had some significant water main breaks, so it probably is higher, but as far as billing goes, we caught it all because of the way that we have a minimum bill up to 5,000 gallons.
so everybody in town pays for it. There's nobody that does not. The church, fire department,
The fire department does not pay, the churches do pay. All the county agencies pay. It's just the Bowling Green Fire and Rescue does not pay. We do meter it, they don't pay.
Why not?
I don't know how it came to be that way. It's never been.
I think it's just, from what I remember back years ago, when it was all volunteer, it was just an in-kind donation back to that organization. Now that it's still a Bowling Green Volunteer Fire Department, but it's got career staff over there. There might be something down the road if you want to look at it.
Yeah.
Here's the catch-22 and what the county's going to tell you is the building is still owned by the volunteers, even though the career staff are staffing the station. The building and the facilities and majority of the trucks right now are still owned by the volunteers. So I can see that would be the only counter that the county would say is, well, if it was our building, then you could bill us, but it still belongs to the volunteers.
We build churches and we build every,
my thought is everyone should rebuild. I don't care who you are. When we get into don't build, it's just a bad practice.
Yeah, that's the only one that I know of. Other than us, obviously we're not building ourselves, probably we do meter our own water just to have that.
How about the VFW?
The VFW, I believe, does pay water.
Okay.
Jason, you said that building over there is the county owns the building?
No, the volunteers own the building.
They own the building.
The volunteer 501c corporation owns the building. The rescue squad and the fire department own the building.
Do they own the building itself? Do they own the property it's on?
Yep. Because just within the last 10 years, it's still majority volunteer supplemented by the career. It hasn't flipped. The volunteerism hasn't flipped yet where it's all career supplemented by volunteers. Like Spotsy is, in Hanover. They have made it to the point where they.
That's what I need to do. Thank you.
And to be honest with you, if they did build a fire department, it would just be a pass through to the county because they pay most of the operating expenses.
A little comparison on the MHI is that the 2010 MHI, which we talked about, was 40,971, comes to 1%. 3414 comes to 1% of that annual income. And that's USDA's kind of guide. They believe that all residents should be able to pay 1% of their annual income for something as essential as water. If we use the 2018 MHI, the 1% is 51.4 each month. So we're saying, using that theory, that each resident should be able to pay 51.4 per month to have something as essential as water.
Again, that's gonna cost the board, assuming the higher rate, income, based income per housing, correct?
But
Significant jump from 10 to 18.
yeah, I don't know. I've never used, well, it says it's the U.S. Census Bureau they got it from. So it says the 2006 to 2010 household American Community Survey 5-year estimate. It says margin of error 12%, so kind of a high percentage, but that's what they use.
Do you know the town blood first?
Yes, it is an urban.
And they pay in proportion to the need?
Yes, they pay a lot of money for their water. In fact, I think I have them right here. Look, I think this is their bill. I was kind of calculating it out. And then just their water bill, is it called? No, that's not it. I think they do more than 200,000. Yeah, they need to come. So with this, using this rate schedule, where we are saying about 6105 every 2 months, so that's 75%, I believe, higher than what we're at now, we could meet the USDA's requirement. But what that looks like with our revenue and expense is here. So this would be our water bill, calculated off of that rate. Account is set up based on exactly what we're at now. Is that pretty much exactly what we're at now, exact same price. Same with the connection fee. Another requirement in there is that we need to increase our penalty. We're currently at 5%. USDA is requiring that we increase it to 10% once everyone is, once your 30 days review. So I took that factor into consideration. You'll see next to it is our current. And these are actually low estimates because at this point in the year, I think we're already almost at 10,000 for penalties. So these are low estimates. General fund transfer, where right now we're transferring all of the $53,986, which is the exact amount we owe for just the water debt on 301. I bring that down to 14,000 because 14,000 is the amount that the taxpayers are paying for their share of the water debt out of the 301 tax district tax. So that needs to be brought back in to pay for the water debt.
I thought that was a special tax district fee, I bet this
Yes.
would pay for itself.
It's a special tax district. It's, I believe,
No, they don't pay, it doesn't pay for itself. It's
Not
about
all.
25%.
I
is
would
what
say
it says.
20.
So this is the percentage that the town pays.
This is only the water portion of that tax, so that was water and sewer. So it was broken down on the total expense and then the percent of how much of that was water, how much was that for sewer, refinanced, and then divided back up over the 38 years that we refinanced that. And we get to each year, and then we take the 26%. So each year, 14,000 of the 301 tax district goes back to the water fund to pay the water debt because we build all the water debt in the water fund, but we have to build the tax district in the general fund. So it has to be transferred. And that's something that the auditor had pointed out in our last audit, we corrected. We were doing it, through Valerie pointed out, we were doing it through CIP. That was where we had set it up when Reeves came on board, and they asked that we to be more transparent, that we reflected exactly where it's spent and exactly where it's coming in, and then make the transfer. That will bring our annual revenue at that rate to $519,738. You can see here is our current operating maintenance. I calculated in a 2% inflation annually, because we all know that the parts go up, insurance goes up, everything goes up. So I calculate that in. Currently, we still have the 53,986 debt service. And so we get annual expenses of 400,845.24. This is before, all of this is before we actually start paying for the debt, the water project debt. So this is the next year. With that, we have a surplus of 118,896. So what I'm showing here is a suggestion to keep the rates in FY22 in this scenario, keep them level or maybe raise them 5% because we don't get that big debt service payment yet. So we give the residents a little more of a break. And then we could move it up in if you see in FY 2023, we first get our interest payments off of that revenue bond. So we pay 2 years of interest payments at roughly $120,000 a year. If we kept it at the rate at the MHI the EDU that the USDA has suggested, we'd have a negative $56,000. So we would not be making enough money to cover our debt. Oh, I take that back. I'm sorry. I told you wrong. We do negative 56,000 if we kept our current rate. If we use USDA rates, we'd be at 41,955.
If you said the connection fees would still be the same?
I did not, right. I kept the average connection fees that we've been doing. It could, if we had a development and we had, 50 houses, all of that money would then go into our reserve. So there is a possibility that we could have more, but I don't want to speculate something and then throw off our.
Yeah, we gotta kind of go off the averages and make that.
All right, so as you see each year in the red here, this is where you would be going if you kept at the rate we're at, in FY25, your debt service, your full debt service kicks in on the USDA loan, which is $218,026 each year. And each year you're showing here that 53,096, which is the debt on the 01. If we, in FY23, if we kick into the USDA rate, suggested USDA rate, we're going to start building a surplus. We could do that for FY23, FY24. For FY25, once your full rate, your full loan payment kicks in, you're negative again, almost $70,000. So you're going to have to transfer that from the general fund. So there's no other option. So, I have come up with it's a little bit out of the box, I want everyone to kind of just take it in, but I've come up with a possible scenario where everybody gets billed the exact same amount in town now, and we do not use any general fund money to subsidize the water rate. So that, in that way, everybody's equally responsible for the water system. We're not using taxpayer dollars to pay for it, so there's no reason that the taxpayers should get a lower rate. USDA has already said that they believe the residents out of town can afford the 98.45, which is your 46.72 a year. It's just every 2 months, 98.45 for minimum bill of water. That's 1% of everyone's annual income. This would be on the high end. So if we look at that rate, so this is the green here, obviously the first year it would be ridiculous for us to charge everyone that amount and have so much in reserve, and that would be a shock. But as we go, you see, once we hit our full debt payment, you have that $82,211 in your reserve. That's a lot. But USDA and actually CERCAT both recommend that you have reserves of at least one debt payment in your chapter vote. So that's not even one debt payment. And it's also we're also gonna be looking at a new well, or we're gonna look at new things. So we're gonna need to start building that chapter vote.
And that's the yearly chapter, right?
Right, that'll be the yearly. So there's definitely room to like adjust this down. But if we're expecting the out-of-town residents to already pay that much, it's not unthinkable to have the in-town residents pay the same if we're not using taxpayer money.
I think the demographics in the out of town are much different than the out of town.
Our lowest,
Much different, much more fixed income in town than it is in the out of town.
I would argue that the White Meadow subdivision and Caroline Manor, that are both out of town, have our lowest income.
Okay, so I'm thinking Maury Heights.
You're right, Maury Heights does have.
New Maury Heights.
New Maury Heights.
Old Maury Heights. I would say.
Old Maury Heights has several fixed income retired, same as you might expect in Bowling Green. Now, the residents over here at the Courthouse Lane Apartments are absolutely a lower income group, but they don't pay their own water bills. So it wouldn't.
Well, it doesn't affect them. How about anybody else in the government paying the water bill? Who else does that? Where's that?
The only other group that I know in the area would be Englewood, Heritage Times, which is out of town.
Right.
So
they don't care.
They don't care. I mean, the state would pay it.
Yeah.
But as a relief to residents, what we could do, because we would be bringing in the revenue on the water side, is we could give them a relief on the general. So we could essentially eliminate personal property. And I bring this up, and I know it's a little out of the box, and I am exploring it. I've run the idea by Andrea, so I don't want you to think I'm like this completely off out of nowhere. But we've had some issues obtaining records from the Commissioner of Revenue, and I pointed out to the Commissioner, and I'll get these back that our values are 472,000 less this year than they were last year, and over the past 3 years are $1 million less. I also pointed out to him that we weren't getting as many tax records, and I got a response that was less than helpful and less than willing to like collaborate and work together and find a solution. So,
Well, I mean, what is their explanation?
the explanation is that residents are choosing not to use Bowling Green as a garage jurisdiction when they register their vehicle to DMV. And there is nothing the Commissioner of Revenue can do about it. It is up to the resident to make the choice to garage that in Bowling Green versus Caroline.
What's the law say?
Mark has told me the law says he can not do anything, his hands are tied. I've asked Andrea, she hasn't given me a definite answer. She said she's dealt with this in other locations. The difficult part is that you don't want to create bad relations and, I mean.
But it seems like this is just, doesn't seem like we had this issue with previous administration.
My understanding is the previous administration was doing something that the current commissioner does not feel is right, the way they were pulling them in and manipulating them within breaks, which is where they're assessing them. They were able to manipulate them and mark them themselves as being involved versus just going by exactly what the DMV is saying. So that's where the difference is. They were bringing them in, the records in, and then changing them based on the criteria that it was okay, yes, we can house number in Bowling Green, and they could say, hey, this is Bowling Green, this one will come up as Bowling Green. They're not doing anything anymore. And in fact, when I spoke to the commissioner yesterday, who said to me he considers those grandfathers, so they were done previous to their new policy of not changing them. If he pulled those records out and he said they're no longer grandfathers, we'd lose 1,100 records. Well, you can see that we only have 1,065 records. So
So they can live in their addresses here, but they can say their car is garaged in Carroll.
Right.
I imagine this happens in a lot of towns and counties. It's even.
So what's the revenue
What's the revenue on the loss on that, on the
personal property?
Personal property?
That way.
So the total of personal property, which includes the business equipment, is $71,000. Now, we get $21,000 of that from the state as personal property tax relief. I would like to equalize the taxes so we continue to get the $21,000 from the state, but the resident doesn't get a impact on the tax.
So you basically change the rate to the bare minimum to be able to receive the
So that's kind of a suggestion I made about 4 months ago. So we have to have some way to balance that out.
Yeah, it's definitely important. You can't just beat everyone down and get everything. You have to be fair. You have to be
No,
fair.
I think this is good thinking. Like, it's a way of meeting the goals of.
So it has to be put to the public properly so they understand. I mean, the rate's coming up over here, it's going down over here, it's an equalization.
Right.
They don't see an impact, which would be a significant impact to a lot of folks.
Yeah.
So if you can put it on the table as an equalization, there will be no major impact at this point in time where we are there. I think that's important. The other thing that we can't tell the future, if the subdivision down in the proposal at the end of Main Street hits, that would be somewhere about $1 million into the coffers for the water sewer. So built into your formula, that would have a major impact.
It would have a huge impact, and then you could adjust the rate. So what my suggestion would be is to adopt a resolution that is doing the bare minimum right now that the USDA requires. So there's nothing saying that we can't change it in the future. We can work right now to make a plan to have it at that point in the future. They're asking us to adopt a minimum EDU. So if we meet that and we decide in the future we'd like to raise it, we'll have a plan, and it's an evolving plan. Like you said, we don't know what's going to happen. If there was big commercial development out on 301, that would make a huge difference, because then the 301 taxes are going up and they're adding more revenue to it.
Well, those are all variable costs, that's figuring that anyway.
And that's why, so long as we go with that minimum, we can always make it higher here, however council sees fit, based on the criteria and the situation at that point.
So if you got the equalization of the property tax to the increase per year, I think that would be a feasible way to do that.
Yeah.
If it's incremental, that's fine, and as long as it's tax and it's equalization all the way across the board, I don't think we'll have much of an issue with that.
And I would like to try to maintain the business equipment also, just in case we do have a big company for commercial come in, we can still get, if they have vehicles and all that, we can still get that. And there's a way to separate that out within that.
Yeah, I think it's easier for residents on fixed income to come up with a little bit each month with the water bill versus right at Christmas time with the December personal property tax.
Yep.
On the water bills, I'd like to suggest maybe billing monthly instead of, if it's not as big as hit and mentally for people.
That is the plan. Once we get all the new meters, it'll be a radio read, and it will be no problem for us to do monthly billing. The hardest part for reading currently is, first of all, it takes the guys about 3 to 5 days, depending on the weather, depending on staffing situation. And then once they get it in, a lot of the meters aren't reading properly. They may have to go out and reread. Tracy and I may have to sit down and look at the history of the meter and say, okay, like, was this meter dropping a 0? Like, we have to go and pick all of that apart. And so that takes an extra 3 or 4 days.
So with the new ones, you don't have to go out and read them?
No. They would be able, most of them would be able to be read, the antenna would be on the water tower. So my understanding is most of them would be able to be read from there. They can also drive around and get the ones that aren't reached. Or I think there was maybe another proposal that they put a second antenna out at the GDOT water tower. And between those two, they should be covered.
So what is the potential impact, I don't know if you're seeing it yet, for COVID? Do you have an increase in unpaid bills? We may see that within the next year of people who have not gone back to work, who doing the job. So has that been calculated in as a variable?
It has not been calculated as variable. We've had virtually no unpaid bills at this point. We did waive penalties, and that was about a $5,000 revenue loss or something around that. Everyone has paid their water bills, and when they aren't able to, they call us and we work it out with them. Some people have found assistance elsewhere, and then we just work out a plan, payment plan given time. But I would say it's not any more than normal. So like I said, we can step into it, but we do need, council does need to adopt a rate that's at least equivalent to this 3548 EDU, which is what we have proposed, here, which is currently, we still be doing personal property, we would be doing in and out of town, out of town at a higher rate. But, so you know that there's a plan for the future because that isn't going to sustain our.
So out of town, like devil's advocate, they pay a higher rate because they're out of town. So it's penalized for where they live.
The reason they are paying a higher rate is because we subsidize the tax dollars. So
we're
they
paying
don't pay
taxes to
tax
cover
dollars.
pipes in the ground, they're not paying taxes. But once we get to this water rate, then we should be.
If everyone is part of that water system, you're taking their fair.
I'm fine, I think, going forward with the resolution to do that as long as it's parallel resolution to equalization of the tax. And then I'll increase resolution in here. That makes sense?
Yeah, can we put it all in the same resolution? Or do we need two separate?
You can put it all in the same resolution. I'll work one up and I'll have a draft resolution at the council meeting. Or that's an option, or the other option is to go ahead and, let me see if I have it. The other option is to go ahead with the lower, kind of similar rate structures that we have now, where everyone, the in-town is less than the out-of-town, and then we work towards that higher.
But you get a faster accumulation if you do the other one now.
Correct.
Yeah, I think that's.
If you do the equalization, your income, your reserve will be there much better.
Yeah.
And another thing that isn't reflected in here, and I don't have enough history to give accurate numbers, is that we are saving significant expenses right now in utilities because Josh, our current director, he's got everyone doing all in-house maintenance, which we weren't doing before. Everything was going out to contractors. So he has set up iWorks so that he has every single maintenance schedule in there. He's got all the assets in there. He's really going to make a huge impact, but we don't know what that impact is yet. We haven't been going on. And he's also very, very conscientious about his spending. So we're going to see a difference.
So how far along is the design, the engineering coming to do the site for the plan?
We are going to bid, once I get this resolution and one other document from Andrea, we'll go to bid on the meter phase. And I'm not sure what percentage are after the lines.
We can't really talk about that yet.
No, but this is the water, this is the water system. The design, the reevaluation, engineering reevaluation of the plant.
Oh, at the plant? We're very early in the stages there. We are still waiting on the proposal for the PPL.
Right.
And actually, some of you may have noticed, some work down on Butler, or down on Courthouse. It's the usual problem we have in this area, Butler, Courthouse, and Ennis. So we have asked them to put that in the proposal, however, we may need to find money for that before. So we're taking that day by day.
Because something that we really haven't even taken into account is the water tower. You know, what do we need to plan? And this right here will allow us to capitalize on that, the extra revenue there to start.
So, yeah,
If something major happened to the water tower, we would need some funds.
Right,
So
and
you said we have a well going out?
DEQ is requiring us to take a well out of service. It's a Cedar Lane well. I can't remember the well number. I apologize. I think it's well 2. They are requiring because of we have to raise the pumps, I believe, because they're worried about the aquifers. So we're going to put a well in the service, I believe, in the Boyd Heights area and take out the well.
Or has 2 areas,
Mhm.
right? So we're losing that well, but we're already picking up one that we already have.
We
I
have,
think we have to pay for that, correct?
I believe so. I don't know how much, from the point that we paid into it to the point of getting it into operation, I don't know what that.
But it's done. It's done.
It's done.
Right. And I believe that we are gonna have to make sure that we don't have any, gross outside could possibly be an issue, so then if there is, then we're gonna treat it.
Yeah, so we're gonna get that.
So, well, with the water bill like this, will we still have trash pickup, everything will be together, like,
Trash pickup is still in the ordinance, so long as it's in there, it is a pass-through, we don't make any money on trash pickup. Whatever we, best rate we can get on the contract, that's what we've done. I do know for sure it will be going up next year.
So that's a $98 or so $1,000 a year contract now?
Yes.
Come on, no.
And that comes to about $15.15 per month per customer. When we went out to bid, we got rates much higher than that, but we were able to get waste management to extend by 1 more year, I think at a 3% increase, that's how we play with people a little lower. But we were seeing rates coming back 15 to 20% higher.
Just remember the games they played the last time. Renegotiated.
I've been writing down every prospect I see.
It just,
The last minute.
Yeah. So,
it just hit me how much history we're gonna be losing come January 1st with just longevity of people being on council. And
yeah, and having that
So
knowledge
that
of being in
when-
the process.
I asked you, like I committed to go also today, is we still have to stay active on the other side of the podium
Yeah,
to keep this knowledge here. Because we have had some, long, certain times here.
I'm gonna bring the point out, because I may forget it, and bring it to fruition, it's important. When you do these kind of things, that somewhere on that bill, that you note that we have reduced your personal property taxes from here on out, because people will forget that.
mm-hmm.
3 years down the road, they're going, man, I got a high water bill. Well, it's on that bill, it's a low line item, it is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't do that, it'll just go away.
Right. So I don't really have much more to present, but I'm happy to answer any questions or give more information, or if I feel like I've missed
I
anything.
mean, what's the consensus on the rate? We go with the higher rate with in the resolution to start equalizing? Starting what year?
My suggestion would be,
2023?
if you start in 2023, you'll have a lot of reserve, but that's a good thing. So,
I think the more reserve you have, the better.
Yeah, I mean, we were, I kind of agree. I mean, 2024, it's only 4,000 less, so,
and we will be at,
but you would lose your.
monthly readings at that point, so that will be, although we'll be at monthly readings before that, because I'll always have help for you.
The more reserves we have at some point, even with the meters and all of these things fall into place, at one point we may even make a reduction.
Right.
Even though it's just as fair.
Once we hit that $1 million reserve, you might want to reduce it
Did
by
you say
1%.
million?
Or billions.
$1 million in 5 years.
And it doesn't ever hurt to pay off your debt early,
That's right.
so,
Yeah, you can use the money towards debt
I
service.
mean, yeah.
Also, are we replacing all the meters in town?
Yes, every single meter, commercial and residential, every meter we have.
So how much are we gonna save the water loss if we do that? What's the calculation?
I don't know that off the top of my head, I'd have to look at the engineering report, see if they put that figure in there. But like I said, I don't know that we have a good data to start with, only because of the way that we do it.
Yeah, because if you only got 7% loss now, you're not gonna make a major pickup. Typically, you see somewhere between 11 and 15% loss in an older system like this. And putting those meters in there will save a significant amount, 6 or 8%. So the pickup is only 7%, you won't pick it all up. You sort of have some pipe piece in there, so at least you have a better handle on exactly what you're using. And some people, water rates may go up, water bills may go up.
It has been the trend when we replace people's meter, the next bill they call us and say, there's something wrong because I'm using so much water, and we have to explain.
If water meters are designed like electric meters, they're designed to slow down before they are to speed up, over time.
So make sure I understand this. So you're telling me that my bill will be the same as my next door neighbor who is out of town? I have sewage, she doesn't.
This is just water. This is just water.
Right.
You will still get your sewage charge.
That's right. So what would a bill look like? Let's look.
It's still at 2.5.
So we talk about, let's talk about 5,000 gallon well here.
So this 6105 is additional for the sewage.
6105 would be the sewer bill.
So your sewage rate's gonna go up proportionally, correct?
No, because we disconnected that relationship, and now they have their totally separate rates. They're not
The sewer
combined.
bill is not going up with the water bill. Right. Okay. So the sewer bill stays the same.
Okay,
The water bill goes
so,
up.
but she will pay the same water bill as I do, okay?
Yeah.
And no sewage this time, okay.
Right.
And what we're gonna do is offset it by giving you the personal property at a discounted rate.
So what you would be seeing, let's say you had
But that's just your
5,000
call, that ain't your
Yeah,
house.
that's your call.
Just your call.
5,000 gallons usage and you're billing it monthly. You'd be looking with your water and your sewer combined. You'd be looking at about $100 a month.
Be how much?
$100 a month. And if you assume maybe your trash is $20 a month, you're looking at $120 a month for water and sewer.
And
That's 2023. That would be 2023. Right now, at our current rates, you pay $126.25 without trash, so about $160 with trash every 2 months.
So that's $80. $40 increase based on what you said. But that'd be offset by that $40 for the personal property tax.
Yeah.
So out of pocket annually, you should be seeing a difference.
It may be a little more. I mean, it depends on what kind of, right.
Yeah.
And how many?
Right. Some people have one, that they're getting billed $4.32 for, because that's our minimum bill.
Yeah.
But as we will be constantly reevaluating our expenses. So if we're seeing our expenses drop, we can always lower the rate. It's important to just keep that balance, keep an eye on everything.
You haven't worked in government a long time, have you? They never lower the rate. You better.
Keep the troll. Well, we can throw it all to the debt. If that paid off,
Did it pay off?
so we can incur some new debt on something.
So in your capital reserves, you estimate like 10% a month you'd be putting in? Percentage of what you'd be putting in?
I don't calculate it down to a percent, but if we look at it, and we're talking about once we kind of get to the height of our expenses, talking about 82,000 a year. So we're looking at
Right,
14%.
Yeah, $6,800 a month.
That's even better.
So my understanding from council is that I come back with a resolution that is showing, in FY '23, we are committing to adopting, a rate that is equalized, where we won't have the personal property, we'll equalize that with a higher water bill, and all in-town and out-of-town residents will pay the bill.
23 or 24, that's really your decision, is whether you do it 1 year
Let's
early.
look at,
So your out of town folks should be right, because they don't have any personal property tax nowadays. Right?
right, they're not gonna
Correct.
get that, but they're also not getting as big of a jump. They've already
They
been
already
paying
paid
twice
for
as
it.
much as that one.
I mean,
And
the
they
good
don't
thing is
take
in
it back.
23, if you do it in 23, you almost got your first debt payment of 25 in the bank. You see what I'm saying, as a reserve. So by the time you get to 25, you should have a payment and a half in the bank
Mhm.
as a,
And we would be, which I think is really important to let the public know, would be fully self-sufficient on the water. I mean, that's a big deal. A lot, very few, especially small localities, are able to say that they're not using general fund money for their water system.
That's something we're putting on the table on that structure. It's very important to let the community know they need to come and enforce the laws.
Yes.
Yeah.
And now, this part does not have to be a public hearing, but when you actually go to adopt the rate, then it is a public hearing. But we need to just give USDA a commitment to the rate structure that will be used.
Right. But it's good to let the public know, it doesn't have to be a
Yeah.
public hearing, to let them know what the process is.
Mhm.
and I think it's appealing because we've given a savings in one area.
And like I said, I am exploring this with, the town attorney, so if she comes back and says, no, we can't do that, we're gonna have to, evolve with that, but she took a minute when I told her that, and I think she maybe thought it was,
And that would take a little bit of reliance off of having to deal with the county.
we will still deal with the county on
On real estate.
real estate, which is really
But-
cut and dry, I mean, if you're gonna have.
Yeah.
It
That's
doesn't,
that's right.
and the bill doesn't move with the residents, it stays with the property, so again, it's super easy to collect on.
Yeah.
And I would like to keep a good working relationship with the commissioner and hope that we can work through the business equipment on this, and, because again, those are when we're cut and dry, these are the businesses in town, it's not, they're not in town keeping their equipment from us. So.
Well, that's kind of a tough one too, and I'll give you a perfect example, myself, when we had our business, we were incorporated in the state of Delaware. And this was many years ago when I had someone from town come to me and say, you're not paying your personal property taxes, and I said, but I don't have a car here in town, because it was incorporated in Delaware, they owned it. It took a while for that to sink in, but that's a possibility with some people having own businesses now too.
If
So
the
that
piece
is
of,
part of the
if the
challenge.
piece of equipment is being used in the town of Bowling Green for business, then it should be taxed in town of Bowling Green.
That's right. If it's leaving the hub of Bowling Green, like REC, if they were in the town of Bowling Green and sending their trucks outside to do work, they should be paying taxes.
Right. And, even if a car, let's say a car is registered in a different state, but it says, I think the threshold is 100, can't recall, I think it's 180 days, then it should be considered lodging. So, military ones,
Right.
All right, so we have a consensus and we will vote on it on November.
Yep.
And we will add the town manager discussion proposal to the November agenda.
Yep.
Okay, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second? All in favor, raise your right hand.
Thank you, everyone.